The Mazda 3 is a family hatch that's often overlooked by prospective Focus and Astra class buyers, but one that's rarely bettered when it comes to its dynamic talents. Now that this second generation version is smarter, better equipped and more efficient, it deserves to find a wider audience. The recipe for the Mazda 3 family hatch seems to be a surefire winner. Take the best chassis in the business in this segment, that of Ford's Focus, and on top of it construct a car with a better reliability record, more aggressive pricing and distinctive styling. Then look for the Mazda 3 at the top of the sales charts. It isn't there. Nevertheless, this model has racked up some respectable sales for its Japanese maker, both in first generation form, launched back in 2003, and in this swoopier, higher tech second generation guise, a car that arrived on the British market in 2009. Mind you, a lot of things have happened in the Focus and Astra family hatchback segments since then, hence the need for a version of this MK2 Mazda 3 that's smarter, better equipped and more cost effective to run. A car like this one, the revised model, launched here in early 2012. Like many of its rivals, this car must not only function as a very good family hatchback, but also meet the needs of downsizers as a shrunken version of more expensive medium-range Mondeo class models from the next segment up. Now, it's a demanding brief that all modern family hatchbacks struggle with, but one that this car has a reputation for meeting better than most. So this improved version's range of detailed changes ought to be enough to keep it among the family hatchback front runners, even if they're not sufficiently headline making to elbow this car much further forward in such a crowded sector. It claims to be a quietly effective package for Focus families prepared to look beyond the obvious contenders in this marketplace, and we're going to put it to the test. Toitsukan. It's a Japanese word that describes that feeling you get of total control. Control that's more predictable, more assured, more usable. Creating that feeling was uppermost in the minds of the Japanese engineers when they came to improve this second generation Mazda 3. And that's what led to the fine-tuning of a multi-link suspension system that already gives this car a head start in this segment, thanks to its class-leading Ford Focus underpinnings. As before, the chassis feels that bit more rigid than the class norm, like that of a larger, more expensive car, with a setup firm enough to appeal to enthusiastic drivers who like tenacious grip and handling without putting off too many school mums who prioritise a comfortable ride. And the result? Well, keen drivers will know what I'm talking about when I say that some cars seem to fight your inputs and are a bit of a battle to drive, whereas others just seem to work in harmony with you. This Mazda 3 is one of the latter. Its sophisticated suspension just works on British roads, and should you feel the urge, you can cover ground at real pace without the car feeling ragged or tiring to drive. Front-end grip is incredibly good, and you have to be doing something extremely ill-advised to bring the stability or traction control systems into play on a dry road. Refinement has been improved too, with none of the suspension bump thump or whistles around the door mirrors that you used to get in the old model. What's even more impressive though about this car is the way that it steers. Take this model out for a spin, and if you're one of those who like your driving, it's one of the things about this 3 that you'll notice straight away. It uses an older style electro-hydraulic system rather than the full electric steering setup that most rivals have. Now, these are supposed to be more efficient, a full electric setup, but personally I'd trade any fractional fuel improvement for the fluent, feelsome, accurate helm that's on offer here. It's been tweaked in this improved model to offer a more predictable, linear feel. And though the variable assistance still makes the whole thing feel rather heavy at higher speeds, it's a steering setup that continues to make this Mazda feel different and special to drive. So far, so good. So can what lies under the bonnet match up? Well, there's certainly no shortage of power on offer. The lineup includes the segment's pokiest turbo diesel, the 185 PS 2.2 MZCD unit, and one of the sector's fastest hot hatches, the 260 PS turbo petrol Mazda 3 MPS, capable of rest to 60 in just 6.1 seconds on the way to a top speed of 155 miles an hour. But we need to focus here on the Mazda 3 variants that most customers will actually choose. And for petrol people, that means a selection between the unremarkable 105 PS 1.6 and the minority interest 151 PS 2 litre. Now, the 1.6 takes just under 12 seconds for the rest to 62 mile an hour sprint, but it does feel a lot feistier on your favourite B-road than even the GTI sports versions of some rival family hatches. The 2-litre petrol model isn't the fastest thing either. It takes around 10 seconds for the benchmark 0 to 60 sprint, but you do get a 6 rather than a 5-speed transmission with this variant, which is useful given that the rather bulky gearbox in petrol models requires a fair bit of tending to keep it on the boil. Now, this isn't so much of a problem if you go for one of the diesels, of course. With 270 newton meters of torque, even the least powerful 1.6 litre turbo diesel with 115 PS has around 40% more pulling power than the petrol 2 litre, enough to give performance that's fairly similar on paper but actually feels superior from behind the wheel. But of course it's nothing compared to the top diesel, the 2.2 MZCD. That's available in two forms with either 150 or 185 PS. Now go for the faster of these two and rest to 60 takes just 8.2 seconds on the way to a top speed of 127 miles an hour. But far more important than that is the thumping 400 newton meters of pulling power that makes overtaking maneuvers so straightforward. Now, you might think that there's nothing particularly British about this car, but you'd be wrong. It was originally styled by an Englishman, Jonathan Freer, working with a British design team, and has a polished look with its triple crease bonnet, bulging front wheel arches and character lines that flow down the sides. The few changes that have been made to this improved model have apparently been aimed at adding a little extra muscular appeal. But if you didn't see that in the original version of this design, then you probably won't do in this one. Enhancements include a subtly restyled front grille and bumper and updated alloy wheel designs. At the rear, where again the bumper's been resculpted, the differences are even harder to spot, but the look remains clean and neat and fairly practical, with between 300 and 340 litres of boot space on offer depending on the derivative you choose. And if you push forward the split folding rear seats, you can free up as much as 1,360 litres in a cargo area that's long, deep and practical. As for passenger accommodation, well, rear room is adequate with good foot space under the seats, although the central passenger won't be very comfortable given that the bench back here has been carefully shaped for two. 3 kids will be fine though. None of this needed much tweaking, but at the wheel a classy update was needed if this car was to keep pace with more recently introduced rivals. In response, the designers replaced the previous silver colour of the lower dashboard console with black and ringed the dials and controls most commonly used by the driver with a satin polished silver that's supposed to be easier to see. The result is a more cohesively styled cabin, and while you wouldn't think yourself to be in a Mercedes A-Class in terms of quality of materials used, there's definitely been a step or two up market in terms of this Mazda's look and feel. As before, the actual ergonomics of the cabin are almost beyond reproach, unless you object to what is possibly the smallest satellite navigation display screen I think I've ever seen. A lot of the minor controls are grouped around the steering wheel, giving the centre console a clean design, and I like the way that most of the features are easy to reach and clearly labelled. big buttons that don't distract your attention away from the road. The driving position too is almost perfect, with height and lumbar support for the seat and reach and rake adjustment for the steering wheel. Only if you were particularly long of leg and liked a close set wheel could you find any cause for complaint. There's also surprising attention to detail with the way that Mazda has chosen to illuminate the car's interior, with a set of subtle LED lights that cast soft pools of light into the footwells and the interior door handle recesses. The instruments and the center console controls fade up as you switch the ignition on, while the aircon and stereo controls react to your touch by pulsing brighter. It's the sort of thing you'd probably never even notice in the showroom, but it's a little touch you'll be delighted to find the first time you drive the car at night. Now, you'll need to have stashed away between £15,000 and £23,500 to get yourself a new Mazda 3. But it's only when you begin to look a little more closely that the value proposition becomes clear. It's a 5-door only model lineup, across which most sales will be of either 1.6 petrol or diesel variants. There's a £1,400 premium to move from one to the other. So how does that stack up against obvious rivals? Well, as you might expect, budget brand sector competitors like Hyundai's i30 and Kia's Ceed can undercut this car, but not by as much as used to be the case. At the other end of the scale, a Mazda 3 will save you about £2,000 or so on a comparable Volkswagen Golf. But it's far more likely that you'll be comparing this car to the big sellers in the family hatchback sector, cars like Ford's Focus or Vauxhall's Astra. Now, list price wise, this Mazda 3 can still undercut these by a significant amount. It might only be £500 or so when it comes to the diesel models, but it could be £1,000 or more if you're talking about the entry-level petrol variant. Whichever Mazda 3 model you choose, 1.6 or 2-litre petrol, or either of the diesels, the 1.6 or the 2.2 MZR CD that I've got here, or even the fire-breathing 2.3-litre petrol turbo Mazda 3 MPS hot hatch, whichever of those you select, you should find your car to be decently equipped, because even entry-level variants get things like air conditioning, a 4-speaker MP3 compatible CD stereo with steering wheel controls and an aux-in socket, a trip computer, a height-adjustable driver's seat, front electric windows, power mirrors and a Thatcham Category 1 alarm. Further up the range, or on the options list, you'll find all the usual nice-to-have features like satellite navigation, smarter alloy wheels, auto headlamps and wipers, cruise control and a premium 10-speaker Bose sound system. Safety provision is excellent, with all models getting traction and stability control, plus an anti-lock braking system with electronic brake force distribution and a function that flashes the hazard warning lights in an emergency stop that'll be aided by EBA emergency brake assist. Now, should all this prove insufficient for you to avoid an accident, then you'll be glad of features like anti-whiplash front head restraints, Isofix child seat fastenings, and a full suite of 6 airbags, driver and passenger, twin front side bags, and full-length curtain bags. This little lot contributes to a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. Now, we've touched on the fact that the Mazda 3 offers strong value for money when new, but it's also a standout performer when the time comes to sell the car. Thanks to the improvements made to this second-generation Mazda 3, Experts Glasses Guide reckons that residual values have improved by between 3 and 6.5%. Now, the net result of that is that most models will return you around 34% of your original investment when the time comes to sell after the usual 3-year, 60,000-mile ownership period. You'll do slightly better, 35%, if you go for the top 185 PS diesel, or 36% for the Mazda 3 MPS hot hatch. As for day-to-day running costs, well, let's start with the volume 1.6-litre petrol model. Fuel consumption here is hardly standout, but the 44.1 miles per gallon combined cycle figure should be acceptable to most, though bear in mind that it drops substantially to 37.2 miles per gallon on the combined cycle if you opt for the automatic variant. CO2 emissions for the 1.6 litre petrol, well, they're at 147 grams per kilometre of CO2. But again, you'll be hit in your tax banding if you go for the auto variant, because the CO2 falls here to 176 grams per kilometre. Now, you might be wondering at this point about the kind of clever start-stop systems that some rivals use to get these figures down, stopping the engine when you don't need it, stuck at the lights or waiting in urban traffic. Well, Mazda has one of these too. It's called iStop, but unfortunately it's not fitted right across the range. The 2-litre petrol variant does benefit though, and as a result achieves 42.2 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 157 grams per kilometre of CO2. Go diesel, and the 1.6 litre variant that most would choose manages 65.7 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and emits just 115 grams per kilometre of CO2. The next diesel step up, the 2.2 litre MZCD 150 PS unit, manages 54.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and puts out 139 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you really want to treat yourself with a Mazda 3 diesel and go for the top 185 PS 2.2 MZCD model, then you won't have to pay too heavily for the prodigious torque on offer. It manages 52.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 144 grams per kilometre of CO2. That only leaves the Mazda 3 MPS turbo petrol hot hatch. It's always been a bit of a thirsty thing, and it's hard to imagine too many owners getting very close to Mazda's quoted 29.4 combined cycle MPG figure. What else? Well, there's a gear shift indicator on most models to help owners get somewhere near to the quoted returns on a normal day-to-day basis. Servicing should be affordable, and insurance groupings range between 13E and 25E for mainstream models, with the Mazda 3 MPS hot hatch sitting alone at group 34E. There are many more obvious choices than this one in the family hatchback sector. But if you want a car that won't impose a swinging financial penalty on wanting to be just that little bit different, the Mazda 3 is a smart pick. The most recent package of improvements don't significantly alter its appeal, but they do serve as a timely reminder of this car's refreshingly self-assured proposition. And I'd forgotten just how good it was to drive. It's a model that's never achieved the success it really deserves, but existing customers love them, and there's a strong demand for these very reliable cars on the used market. So a groundswell of informed customers obviously exist who recognise this Mazda's talents. It may not be one of those family hatchbacks that grab you on first acquaintance, but the longer you spend with one, the more you're likely to appreciate the depth of thought that's been put into the design of the things that really matter. A careful choice then, but one that evidence suggests you're unlikely to regret.